Hello everyone, my name is Frederick Lopez, and on this episode of Hidden Gems, I'm going to be going over the 1987 film, My Best Friend is a Vampire. My Best Friend is a Vampire stars Robert Sean Leonard as Jeremy Capello, Evan Moran as Ralph, Cecilia Peck as Nora, Cheryl Pollack as Darla Blake, David Warner as Professor McCarthy, and Renee Auberjonois as Modok. Now, again, the 80s was full of horror films as well as subgenres with comedies and vampire films, more or less teenage vampire films. Most popular come to mind are The Lost Boys and Fright Night. And this film has a little bit of like Fright Night mixed in with another comedy film called Once Bitten. I reviewed that film a couple of months back. You can check it out on my channel here. But My Best Friend is a Vampire is pretty similar to like films like Once Bitten, but with a little bit more of the atmosphere as Fright Night. But it's still a comedy. It's not really too scary, to say the least. It centers around this character of Jeremy, and pretty much he ends up meeting this wonderful woman. This attractive lady has like a one-night stand with her, and she bites him. Before the process can continue any further, this vampire hunter interrupts their making out process and is after them. Is played by David Warner. Yeah, David Warner, the guy from Ninja Turtles 2, Titanic, etc., etc. Anyway, Jeremy starts to figure out that he's becoming a vampire, but this film follows the usual rules while also giving it a few embellishments. We see Janos Audrin, the voice of Janos Audrin from Legacy of Kain. Yeah, he plays a vampire in this again. The character of Modok explains everything to Jeremy. Supposedly, they're bitten once, so they're living vampires. They can walk out into the sun. They can even drink on other blood other than human blood. They drink on pig's blood. Only undead vampires can burn in sunlight, so they did change the rules quite a bit. And the whole film is really Jeremy going through these changes of becoming a vampire. Now, I don't know why it's called My Best Friend is a Vampire, considering Jeremy is the main character, but he has a best friend named Ralph, and Ralph kind of helps him through this process. In addition, the vampire hunter, played by David Warner, and his sidekick mistake Ralph for Jeremy, and they're after him, believing he's a vampire. So Jeremy must save his friend Ralph towards the end of the film. You have the woman there who bites him. He actually dreams about her first. He's having this weird dream. It's probably like the most craziest dream sequence in like a freaking film I've ever seen. He's with his girlfriend and then he imagines this woman. So maybe it just goes to show that maybe he was born to be a vampire, or maybe it was more of like a psychic connection of this vampire trying to seduce him. Who knows? But it's kind of weird at the beginning. Other than that, there is some funny moments, some lighthearted humor like in many of the 1980s films. You get an early role of Kathy Bates. You also have his parents, and they don't know he's a vampire. They think he's like coming out of the closet or something. No, he's turning into a bloodsucker. So it's kind of a funny comedy, and of course it came out in '87, the same year as The Lost Boys. And it's a really, really good film. And the reason why I bring it up on Hidden Gems is that not many people talk about it. Lost Boys Fright Night, even Once Bitten, is more well known than My Best Friend is a Vampire. And this is kind of a hidden gem in my opinion. It's better than The Vampire's Kiss with Nicolas Cage. And it does star a young Robert Sean Leonard later on in films like Richard Linklater's Tape or House as a doctor. So it's very, very interesting to see this movie. It's a lighthearted comedy. It plays upon the vampire rule. So if you're a fan of like teenage comedy, 80s films, or you're a fan of vampires, I think you'll highly enjoy My Best Friend is a Vampire. And in an indirect way, it does have a little bit of subtext in there, much like other horror films like A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And other things about like coming out or finding your identity. It's kind of weird. I never really looked upon that on a first viewing, but repeated viewings, you can look deeper into it if you want, or you can just see it as it is. A teenager becoming a vampire. Basically, teenage werewolf. Teen Wolf. And it's funny because overseas it was called I Was a Teenage Vampire. So here it's called My Best Friend is a Vampire. Above all, though, it's a very, very funny movie, has a good plot, and it's only like 90 minutes, so it's very short. It does play upon different tropes of the vampire and pokes fun at them. It's very comedic that way, while also doing something kind of unique and on its own. That helps it establish itself from the other films. If you like films like Once Bitten or like Lost Boys Fright Night and so on and so forth, Monster Squad, you might like this film. It's not the best film ever, but it is an enjoyable film. And with Halloween coming up next month, I think you'll highly enjoy it if you find it at your local library or on digital or wherever. So I give My Best Friend is a Vampire a score of a 7 out of 10 and a B. It's not the best teenage comedy vampire movie ever, but it is a solid movie in its own right, and it's funny. You do relate to the character Jeremy. You get to see him deal with becoming a vampire, but like in a very funny way. It's not done in a very dark way. I like how his friend kind of hides it from his parents, and how Ralph and Jeremy just find themselves in the midst of this vampire underworld, so to speak, no pun intended, between the vampires and this vampire hunter. And I like how they establish the rules of the vampires and how they can basically survive and exist within our world. So it has a good flow. The humor is very lighthearted. The soundtrack is actually pretty catchy, and it does have some good performances. And a really, really strange dream sequence. Yeah, dream sequences in the 80s were a bit nuts, to say the least. But above all, it's a fun film to just, if you have some free time, to watch and enjoy. So yeah, a 7 out of 10 and a B. I highly recommend seeing My Best Friend is a Vampire if you're a fan of films like Once Bitten or Fright Night or any other comedy vampire 80s films. And if you have seen My Best Friend is a Vampire, let me know in the comments below, what did you think of the film? If you like this video, click the like button, comment, and subscribe for more videos.